poem. Haven't done poems, have we really? This is a really lovely poem. It's called Rocca San Giovanni. That is actually the name of a place in Wedgwood.
Spain.
Nope.
India.
Nope.
Mexico.
Nope.
Germany.
Nope.
England.
Nope. Italy. Oh. Italy. And it's a World War II poem. So if we have a look, if you look on the 10th of October 1943, Italy swapped sides. So they're one of the countries, remember right back, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, when we looked at which countries were allies and which countries were axes, and we talked about some countries actually swapped sides, didn't they? Italy was one of those countries, wasn't it? Italy had a really horrible leader at the time as well. But they swapped on the 28th of September 1943, Italy surrenders. And that means surrenders to the Allies. Okay, so it was on the German side originally. And then they swapped sides on the 10th of October. So, you know, a couple of weeks later they swapped and then they became fighting for us. Does that make sense? It's just worth having that in your mind when you read this. We are going to read it together. You don't have to read it out loud. If you don't want to. It's the first time you've had it. It's a poem, so we've got to think about what when we're reading out loud.
How it's spoke.
Yes, how you say it. You know, we talked about your intonation when things go up and down. Also, a sentence isn't necessarily a line. There's a very clear, there's commas and things, but sometimes it goes over more than one line. Yes, there's an aeroplane. You might be able to hear it on the film. There's an aeroplane going over as well, which often we all have to look at for an aeroplane, don't we? Are you ready to read? So just read along quietly if you don't want to read it out loud. It is quiet here now. The valley is silent. Only the birds of the stream have their noise. The twittering, bubbling, sweet sounds of nature. Apart from this, silence, which nothing destroys. The smell is a faint one of morning and pine trees, of bracken and water, of woodland and stream. The sight is of rushes, of millhouse and lime trees. The feel is of peacefulness, sweet as a dream. But at one time this valley of heaven, became a most torturous valley of hell. For the fighting was bitter, the Hun held on grimly, regardless of losses, and many men fell. For the British came north, and the silence was shattered by rifle, machine gun, trench mortar, grenade. The Messerschmitts diving brought sickening terror. The valley vibrated with death's serenade. But the British advanced, and the valley was taken. The fighting moved northward as Jerry moved back. The only remains to give proof of the fighting are freshly dug graves at the side of the track. Again it is peaceful, the valley is silent. Only the birds and the stream have their noise. The twittering, bubbling sounds of nature. Apart from this, silence, which nothing destroys. And actually, look at the date on the bottom. George Fraser Galley, not sure. November 1943. Think about what we just talked about, that date. So November 1943 is when Italy, it was written after Italy had swapped sides. So it's very much talking about the events at the end of September, beginning of October time. Okay, which might help you in context. Now, there's a lot to digest, isn't there, in this poem? There's a lot to talk about, a lot to think about, and we're going to be looking at this all week, so we're not going to rush and try and get it all in today. So let's have a look. Is there any vocab that you might not know, that you might not be sure of? I've got 4 words here, but actually when I was reading there was something else I thought, I'm not sure if I know the meaning of that. Right, the 4 we're going to look at, my 4, are serenade. So it was the valley vibrated with death's serenade. What happens when you serenade someone, do you think? Anyone heard? You sing to someone, you serenade them. It's often used in things like Romeo and Juliet, and they serenade each other, lovers serenading, men serenading women. Sometimes when you go to Spanish places, they come in and serenade the guests, don't they? Yeah? So, death serenade is death singing, into more what it means in context. Trench mortar, so that's in the line, by rifle, machine gun, trench mortar, grenade. What's trench?
Assuming that's being digged up.
Yeah, it's basically a
Ditch.
hole dug in the ground, so like a log, like a trench. If you have ever seen a house being built, they build trenches because that's where they put the foundations in to build the house. In World War One, and actually if you think about the Emergency Zoo, they often talk about how their dads were in the trenches in World War One. There was a lot of trench combat in World War One where they had to hide in the trenches. They dug them out, so the land is here, the trench goes under, so the men kind of hid in them. So that's what trench is. A mortar is another word for a bomb or an explosive device. Yeah? Bracken. Of bracken and water. We talked about this one, didn't we? Just a minute ago. Can you remember what it was?
Was it like brambles?
Yeah, like brambles, like dry, prickly, all sort of mixed up together. Do you know what I mean? You know when you get stuck in blackberry bushes and things like that. So that's just another way for that. Bracken tends to think it kind of quite dead and breaks quite easily. Grimly.
It's like really grim. There's like loads of dead bodies and everything.
Possibly, yes. They're really not pleasant. Were there any other words? Were there any other words that you thought, oh, I'm not sure about that one? Messerschmitt dive bombing. That is a type of German plane, I believe. It's something to do with the German Air Force. And Messerschmitt is German, isn't it? So it's like definitely something to do with the German side. The Messerschmitt diving brought sickening terror. So it sounds like airplanes diving. I'll double check, but I'm sure it's either Luftwaffe is the Air Force, so it must be a type of plane, like a Spitfire.
I don't have a word, but I have a phrase I don't really understand. Bubbling sweet sounds of nature.
Bubbling sweet sounds of nature. Bubbling. The twittering bubbling. What's that, mate? Anyone else got an idea?
Singing or
Do you know what I think? This is just me. If you've ever been to like a forest with like a river or a stream, and if it goes really quiet, you can hear the birds twittering, and almost the stream kind of bubbles. You know how it kind of flows? The sweet sounds of nature. That's what it makes me, in my head, it kind of makes me think of like a wooded area with like a little stream bubbling along. So not rushing and horrible, a real nice sound, just bubbling over. Any more? I thought there was something I read and I thought, oh, I'm not sure about that one. It's quite a hard-hitting poem, isn't it? Quite a hard-hitting poem. So what you are now going to do is, on Seesaw, this is saved as an activity. You guys are going to write something, but we'll have a quick look at the questions together. Won't necessarily answer them, but we'll have a read of them together. Everything you need is in this poem. Okay? All the answers are in the poem. So write down 2 sounds which can be heard now that the war has gone. Find and copy the phrase which the poet uses to describe how calm and quiet the town is. Now we might have just talked about something which might help that. How did the people of the town regard the Messerschmitt? What are the only clues that the fighting took place? Why do you think the poet described the town as both a valley of heaven and a valley of hell? The poem was written in 1943. Why is this important? And that is what we have talked about already. If you read the poem, it starts off, it is quiet here now, the valley is silent, doesn't it? There's this faint smell of morning, as in early morning, pine trees. At one time, this valley of heaven, became a most torturous valley of hell. What is the actual event do you think that's happening in this poem?
Is it like when they surrendered to Britain and they joined?
Yeah. Basically, it was the fight. It was the battle of it being. So it was German on the German side, kind of. Or I think it sounds like it felt like it wasn't really doing any fighting. and then Britain came in and tried to take over, and they had to surrender to Britain. So it's all about that kind of battle. Think back to like the Battle of Britain and the Blitz and things like that. It's referring to a moment in time. So it starts with this nice and calm, and then there's a battle, and then it is peaceful at the end. Okay, so that's what lots of these. So what are the only clues the fighting took place? Why is it a valley of heaven and a valley of hell? Think about what was happening. Copy the final copy. Did that one. I think you got answers to all of them, haven't you? Yeah? Did you find answers to all of them? Okay.